So I didn't forget about the other example, the PII one. So why was this hard to do? You can imagine, right? We had to not only look at every single table, but now we had to look at every single field, and on a field-by-field basis, meticulously categorize every single thing. Turns out implementing column-level data access restrictions across a data warehouse is hard. It's a hard problem. So we tried to do the easy thing, and first we tried to use the out-of-the-box thing that Vertica has. It didn't work. The performance was really bad. It was crippling, so we turned it off. Then we said, all right, let's create a view for every different PII, and then mathematics and multiplication told us that every single view for every single PII multiplied the number of users who might have different permutations, blah, we said no. And then the last thing we ended up doing was that case statement thingy that I talked to you about earlier. It wasn't the most elegant in terms of implementing it, and it wasn't the most maintainable, but you know what? It got us to where we needed to be. So I'd be lying if I said that this is the absolute best solution on the planet. It has its own kinks and imperfections, but you know what, we're working through it. So let's ask the question, did we win on this one? Okay, sure. We did an okay job. I mean, the thing that we put in place was a little bit difficult to maintain, but you know what, it works, and it does the thing that we need it to do, which is protect people's personally identifiable information. The system requires a little bit of maintenance, and we're working through the kinks, but it is worth noting that Etsy took a pretty strict interpretation of what was required to protect people's identities. So they kind of like went above and beyond, and that made it harder from an implementation perspective. So I feel good about that, right? Because we extra protected people, and it's hard for us, fine. That's fine with me. All right, so moving on to our last and final challenge. Protect investors from falsified financial reporting caused by malicious data manipulation. So what a mouthful. What does this mean? Don't be Enron. That's basically all it means. Put checks and balances in place so that we can prove that the numbers we report to the public are from fact and not fiction. That's what we needed to do. So why was this hard to think about? Basically, we had to prove that the data was not tampered with, right? And we needed to prove that between point A and point B, nothing weird or malicious happened to the data before we were able to produce our financial reports. And what was hard about this is we had to do it on an ongoing basis, right? So you write data at Etsy.com, the code writes all of your financial material data to the production database. Eventually it gets copied down to our data warehouse. We do things to it. We slap on data access controls, like I said before. We put roll-up, snapshots, views, data marts on top of it, and eventually it makes its way down into our reporting, and then we report our financial numbers at the end of the month and at the end of the quarter. So let me pause for a second and introduce an additional wrinkle that made this extra hard. There is this thing called segregation of duties. This is a very normal way that people would solve this problem. So segregation of duties basically means I'm Sally the engineer, I write some code, but I'm not allowed to push the code to the website. Then Tracy Basie, the engineer, can push the code for me because she has permissions, but she's not allowed to make a database schema change that has to go along with it. Then Steven Bleven comes along and he can make the database schema change, but he can't write to the database, you get it. So you chunk up people's responsibilities so that some act of data manipulation would require, collaboration over a mass number of people. A lot of people do this. So why didn't we do this? This would have been way easier. Why didn't we do this? If anyone knows anything about Etsy, then you've heard us talk about continuous deployment at some point. Basically, it just means that we are able to push code to the website every day, all day, whenever we want to. Putting segregation of duties into place would have been like death to continuous deployment. We wouldn't have been able to do it anymore. So we didn't do it. We could have done it, but we didn't. We were stubborn. We wanted to keep continuous deployment, so we did this other crazy thing instead. So what's the other crazy thing we did? So basically, we created a system of tools, right? We're engineers, we work with data, we created a system of tools. We created one tool to keep an eye and to monitor changes to code that write financial and material data. Then we wrote another tool to double check the business logic that does the calculations that creates the financial and material data. And then we wrote another tool that logs all of the data that gets written to production, and then later, at some point in time, compares it against all the data in the data warehouse that was used to create our financial reporting. So why was this hard to do? So we didn't implement segregation of duties in favor of keeping this continuous deployment thing. And in making this choice, I'd be lying if I didn't say that this might have created some non-zero amount of work for engineers anyways every time that they needed to push code, right? So there's some red tape. They got to fill out a thing, they got to push a ticket, they got to do, fill out some things, some rationale, justification. Do you think that the engineers were thrilled by this extra stuff that we added to their workflows? No, they hated it, so this was hard. And as an added bonus, all of the technical implementation for these tools was hard too, so this is just all around complicated. So why else was this hard to do? Let me describe just one of the tools super quickly to you, because again, I don't have that much time. This one's called Lasso. So this is the third thing that basically compares the data. So this is how it works, right? So you have Etsy.com, we write data to production, it gets copied down into our data warehouse, and we produce financial reporting. Simultaneously, we're also writing that same data to the Lasso logs, which becomes the source of truth. Then, at the end of every month, we play one of those spot the differences games that you find sometimes at the bar, and we write all of the data that we use to create our financial reporting from Vertica up into Lasso as well, and then we compare everything. We compare every single thing that might have happened in the last month to make sure that the data that was written at the time from inception is the same data that we use to create our financial reports. Each difference is explained, resolved, calculated, and eventually signed off by controls and the CTO and your mother and everybody. There are so many things that are hard about this. False positives can be created by timing differences on the logs in the database, production outages, backfills, weird escapee character things. Like, this is data. It's messy. It's always messy. There's nothing not messy about data, so we're working on this. So did we win? Yeah, totally, we did, because we got to keep continuous deployment, and we didn't do the segregation of duties thing, and we protected investors from fraudulent financial reporting caused by malicious data manipulation. We did all those things, so this is a total win for us. Who cares if it was a little hard? That's what we're here for. So let's recap. What were the things that we needed to do post going public to keep data accessible, but not too accessible? So one, right, we protected our people from insider trading allegations by doing the bucketing thingy. Two, we protected customers' identities and personal information by doing the case statement thingy. And we protected investors from falsified financial reporting, blah, 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 caused by malicious data manipulation by doing the don't be Enron thingy. And we did this all while still enabling everyone in our company to get all the data that they needed to make good data-driven decisions. Totally a win. So the lessons. So if I had to put some lessons up on one slide and make it a little bit catchy, I would say, I, Jenn Clevenger, observed one thing, I learned one thing, and I realized one thing. Aren't you guys dying of curiosity to know what I learned, observed? I observed Etsy is a special snowflake. Etsy cares about everyone. They care about their investors, they care about their people, they care about their customers, they care about their engineers and their employees. We did all the things, but we chose the hard way to do it because it was the thing that helped us to preserve the things that were important to us. What did I learn? Staffing this work is hard. So if you're planning on taking on any of these challenges in the next little while, let me impart some wisdom on you right now. Staff it like it's hot. Don't act like compliance is a bad word. Don't talk about this like it is a favor that you're asking an engineer to do just this one time. Don't pretend that you're not going to be working on these problems forever from now on going forward. This is kind of part of your new life. Sure, it's not really our core competency, and this doesn't sell more cat sweaters for us, but it keeps us in business, it keeps us honest, and most importantly, it keeps our execs out of jail. That's always good too. And what is the last thing I realized? This is interesting work. Making big data accessible, but not too accessible, is actually a very interesting problem to solve. These are dynamic, complex engineering solutions that require thoughtful and creative designs. This 20 minutes of babbling that I just did right now, it doesn't even do any of these systems that I described justice. I'm embarrassed that I'm actually talking about them in this way. I hope they don't know. These are not short-term throwaway projects. These are not products that may succeed or fail at some point in time. These are full-blown, forever systems that take time and effort to build, require strategic thinking, will always be prioritized on your roadmap, And as a given bonus, we'll give you tons of great exposure to senior leadership if you do it right, and probably if you do it wrong too. Thank you.